I'm your host, Daniel James II, and we're back at it again with Season 3 of the Culture Connect, the podcast for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Inspired by the vision of our Executive Director, Dr. Dolores DaCosta, we bring forward the voices of the forgotten, the stories of the unheard, and the realities of the marginalized in the Palmetto State. This season, you're going to hear from community organizers, business owners, nonprofit experts, tribal leaders, filmmakers, men and women, striving every day to make South Carolina a great place to live for all of its citizens. Be sure to follow us on all digital platforms so you don't miss the next episode of the Culture Connect. Greetings, family. Welcome back to another episode of the Culture Connect. I have a very, very special guest in the studio today. As you know, every November we celebrate Native American Heritage Month. And I am so glad to have in the studio today, he is the chief of the Edisto Natchez-Kusso tribe. We're here in Ridgeville, South Carolina, on the day of their powwow. Please welcome to the studio, Chief Dr. Brother Pastor John Glenn Creel. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Of course. Now, you talked about preserving heritage and preserving Native American culture. I want to bring that up because we just talked last year for celebrating Native American Heritage Month. We talked to Chief Lamar Nelson of the Esquimalt tribe. And I asked him the same question about, why should a Gen Z person, Native American or not, why should they care about preserving Native American heritage, culture? I know you see the importance of it. Chief Creel, talk about that.
Yes. Well, if you don't know where you came from, you never get to where you need to go, is my thought. We have to know who we are. When growing up here in this community, we always referred to ourselves as Cherokees because the Natchez part of our tribe did stay with the Cherokee for a while until we sought refuge through Governor James Glenn to come to this area. And then, of course, the Natchez part of our tribe joined with the PD and was settled on the Coachman property, which was a reservation, 100-acre reservation in the Four Hole Swamp. Well, as the Kusso part of our tribe began to migrate from the Albemarle Point, Charleston, Rantals Creek, Ravenel, and then Red Oak in Colleton County, Red Oak Road, and then right where we are today, we settled. And then, of course, those two communities began to interact and intermarry. So, growing up, I would always say, and even John Reynolds, who's an African-American activist, he came and marched with our elders during desegregation and integration. And our school was the last to integrate in the public school system. But thanks to him and Victoria DeLee, and they're marching with our elders and them spending time in jail, we were able to have our children go. But the key is, I think a lot of this has been sort of secret, because when you were when was it, 1924 that we became citizens, so it was like, being an Indian, if you were light complected, you were considered white. If you were dark complected, you were considered colored in those days, or black. And, so you would sort of try to blend into society. It was just, it was a challenge, but we all lived in the same community and everybody around us knew that was the Indian community. They would call us, in my community, Creels. And I'd say, no, that's just my last name. I'm an Indian, And back then we would say Cherokee because we knew of some of our history that was shared with us, part of our tribe staying with the Cherokees and then moving down to this area. And it seemed like the Cherokees as a federal tribe was getting more public acceptance, as Indians. So that's what we would say, of course. And then John Reynolds in his book recently that was released, he talks a little about that and how we would refer to ourselves as a Cherokee, but later we would declare that we are the Natchez-Kusso tribe, which we've been, that's what we've always been. So.
And I tell you, that history of the Natchez and the Kusso almost like converging onto one spot and becoming one big community or one tribe. It's some beautiful, intricate history. You were sharing something prior to this about some involvement of the governor at that time, Governor Glenn, or some history about that. Can you share that as well?
Yep. Governor James Glenn gave an area of refuge called the Coachman property for the Natchez part of our tribe in the PD. And then, of course, with the pressures on the Kusso tribe, there were years ago, the colonial settlers accused the Kusso part of our tribe of stealing grain and taking some of their cattle. And of course, they thought Mother Earth, that you take what you need and use what you need. And they didn't see it as stealing. They saw it as a gift from Mother Earth, et cetera, So, but anyway, they were accused and there was a war declared. And then many of them were sent to slavery, the ones that survived, and then some were allowed to settle. The part of our Kusso tribe that stayed to settle was used to capture runaway slaves. And part of that, there was a law, I can't remember the date, that if a native was captured a runaway slave, they would be given ammunition and any type of weapons that the African slave would have. Well, we've just recently met with Representative Clyburn at the Beadler Forest, and they declared that as an Underground Railroad site. Wow. So we do know that some of the Maroons, which were African slave communities, live still in the swamps of the Low Country. And the thought was that they had migrated up north and far away from their families, but they were right here and protected and lived together with our tribe. And so our tribe didn't just capture runaway slaves, but I think they worked sort of in a double agent capacity and facilitated escape through the Underground Railroad. And some of our elders probably too, when they saw the oppression that was taking place in the, in the community and so forth. So, yeah.
And see, that's another part. It's very unknown history about how much these ethnic minority groups, quote unquote, since we're talking CMA here, actually have had long-standing relationships.
Exactly.
And
yes,
what you're describing is more of like a hosting relationship, almost, working together. And to survive. And the same thing too. I guess before the Jim Crow laws, et cetera, we visited the McLeod Plantation, which is right off from Albemarle Point, excuse me, which is a part of our original 12,000 Kusso plantation or reservation. Yeah. We went to visit that burial site, and it's a cemetery under trees. It's overgrown. So there were soldiers, there was an African minister, and there was a mound on one side and a mound on the other side. And no doubt that's our Kusso part of our tribe. And you see, you've got soldiers, you've got African, and you've got ministers, and you've got natives. So buried all together, so it was laws that came up in the land that created the division and so forth. But the tribes grew, they survived and they worked together. Yes. On the Dorchester Heritage Center board, I'm on that, and one of the archaeologists that's a part of that board, he found some pottery that was along that area in the Kusso reservation area. And it has African etchings, but it also has Native American paintings. So that tells you that it was coexistence and working together, in the days of old. Mutual coexistence, like that is the key, especially when it comes to people living together in harmony, especially citizens. We are one country. Most people want a good life for their families, and they also want to be able to preserve their heritage and their culture.
That's right.
And speaking of heritage and culture, we are sitting in what is the Edisto Indian Free Clinic. But you have, before we get to your medical work, Dr. Creel, there's a picture of a man on the wall here behind us, Chief Johnny Creel, and that's your father, correct? Talk about growing up, being sort of embedded and enmeshed with Native American life here, and then having a father as a chief, and what sort of cultural values and heritage you were passed on to you as a child.
I think the biggest thing was, my dad was always a hard worker. He worked for Hercules with stumping, lightered stumps, the yellow pine stumps, and they would ship those stumps to Brunswick, Georgia to make dynamite and resins, different types of chemicals and so forth. Anyway, he worked for them for years. He retired and he started his own business as Hercules, as his own Johnny Creel Hercules business or something. like that. And then later he would retire and work for the county. And then he retired and went back to the county. And then I think he retired and went back. So I think he retired 5 times. So the work ethic was important to Daddy. And he always pressed to us. I have 3 siblings, older brother and 2 younger sisters. He always impressed upon us the importance of education, because when they grew up, he went to 5th grade, was in the military for a while, the Navy. And my mom went to 3rd grade, and then they had to work. They had to work in the fields. They had to, corn, cotton, pick cotton, everything. We always made jokes about it. They would have babies in the field, and the babies would start helping them pick cotton, or tobacco, etc. But anyway, those days they just all as a community worked together. We had different ones like Daddy and Big Bub, we called it, but he was Walter Creel. He would take ice around to the community from the ice houses that were established around about. And meats. We had a place up about maybe 100 yards up from a tributary we called George Aches Lake, which was a tributary or a lake from the Edisto River. There's a big dirt bank, and the community would store meat under the ground because of the temperature difference. And we've learned that in St. Giles Kusso Plantation, they would store meat in the cellar, in the basements of these homes, because they learned in the days of old that meat would last longer in those cooler temperatures. And so our community would do the same thing. So, and then Daddy was, I guess the big part of our leadership was the churches in the communities. Daddy called him Grandpa Marion. He was a pastor. And then Uncle Joseph, his son, was a pastor, and there's others that had led, because natives were not allowed to gather, but you can go to church. Yes, so their meeting places or community was the church. And, as federal acknowledgement, the process is being undertaken. One thing you have to prove is that you've been in an area for over 100 years. Well, we've got, our ancestors buried in the cemetery in the 1800s, and we still live here. So, the cemeteries and the churches and the schools, because in the Creeltown Indian community, the school was first in at the Red Oak Road area there. Then it moved to where the current Little Rock Holiness Church is, where I pastor. Been pastoring there for 28 years. I grew up in that church, gave my heart to the Lord with the Church of God ministry in this community, and helped build the church here, the Church of God, and have done a lot of mission work and still do mission work with the Church of God. But our church is the only independent, non-denominational church that serves our community, and I'm a tribal member that's a pastor. The church here that was a Baptist church is now Given's Pentecostal Holiness Church, and is pastored by my wife's cousin, Ted Mucklevaney, who's a tribal member. And in the Edisto Indian Church of God, there's Brother Mike James is the pastor, and he's a Church of God pastor, and he is a white pastor.
Wonderful.
But anyway, Daddy, he always stressed, I remember in 1995, I joined a Council of Native Americans, because Daddy was always interacting with, at that time, there were 5 tribes that were organized, those communities were trying to assert themselves. And, I joined a Council of Native Americans because there was a big rift between the council, and I always thought in politics, numbers were important versus a smaller community. So if you could come together, and that, would affect politics and laws and so forth. And Daddy sort of instilled that into me. And, but when I joined the Council of Native Americans, at that time, Matthew had become chief, and they would not allow me to join the tribal council until I resigned from the Council of Native Americans, which I was hoping to be a liaison between those 2 organizations at that time. When 1995, I resigned from the Council of Chiefs, and I joined the tribal council here. So I served on the board until about 5 years ago, when I was elected chief.
Wow. And your father is still alive?
He lives next door to me. He's 88 years old. He's a member of the church I pastor there in the community. He usually, if he's there, he sings. He and Mom have been sick for about 4 weeks now, but they should be back Sunday to be with us, and I'm sure he's going to want the mic to sing.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yes.
Now, you've already mentioned it, so we'll dig into that part and lead into talking about your work in medicine, is that you are a man after God's own heart. And you do talk about this sort of community being centered around revival. Talk a little bit about how the medical work, the free medical work, some of the things that you've done in the community arise out of that. Is it natural, or is that how it's always been, that type of thing?
Well, my mom told me when I was 11, I said I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't remember that. when I was growing up in high school, I thought about being a doctor, but I knew that, none of us have ever made it that far. I was like a first generation college graduate. And then I did machine shop in high school, junior, senior year. So I was going to do, industrial education, be a teacher. I applied to Clemson to go and learn to be a educator, basically. But I didn't get accepted there. They wanted me to take the SAT again. And the College of Charleston accepted me on a probation, and I decided to get married at 19 as a freshman in college, because I was my birthday was later, so I was 18 graduating high school, and then so anyway, went to College of Charleston, and my best friend, his dad was a doctor in China, and his mom was a nurse, but she and his brother Stephen and Simon moved here so that they can get a good education, et cetera. And he and I became best friends, and we were pre-med. So we pledged Alpha, Epsilon, Delta, and Eta Sigma Phi, which was pre-med society in a classical language. So anyway, we competed. So I made good grades. But in high school, Daddy would give us so much money for grades. So I felt, wow, this, making good grades is important. So I always made good grades, so I was made the honor roll, every time. And, so hopefully I'm answering your question there, but then, so I was pre-med and I applied for medical school, took the MCAT, got an interview, got put on the waiting list. Mm-hmm. So I had to get a job, and I had to choose between the U.S. Vegetable Laboratory, which was research with Clemson over in Charleston, or being a long-term substitute teacher. Mm-hmm. So I chose teaching because I figured that would keep my mind active and keep me young, working with children, young people. Mm-hmm. So I went and was a long-term sub for 6th grade. Didn't get accepted to medical school, so I had to make a decision. I was offered by the public school system a teaching position at the high school, the smaller high school, Ruffin High School, or an emotionally handicapped class, teaching about 6 or 7 students with emotional handicap problems. But I made the decision to go to the high school, and I taught chemistry, physics, biology, applied biology, chemistry, applied physics, calculus. So again, trying to keep my mind active, teaching and human anatomy, mm-hmm. plant taxonomy. Those were just some of the things I enjoyed. And the second year, I was teacher of the year at the high school. And in the third year, I became department chair. And then that was the year I took the MCAT again, because I figured it was my score, but it wasn't. I just didn't sell myself that I was going to be committed to the 4 years, and matriculate through medical school. So anyway, I did better on the MCAT, and I applied again, and this time I got accepted. So, and after getting accepted to medical school, I was volunteering here at the free clinic. Dr. Baggett actually built this clinic in 1995, I believe it was, or 1990, sometime around then. And I would volunteer with him when I got into medical school on Saturdays, him and some of his partners. And anyway, and I went to McLeod for residency. I started pastoring my freshman year of medical school too. Wow. So I drive back and forth from Cottageville, just connected to the community, you know what I mean? The roots are here. Yes, wanted to be home. And then I got married, had a family, wanted to grow my children to grow up in the community. And then of course, my oldest son was born with spina bifida, and seeing the interactions of him with all the different doctors, the specialists. I enjoyed the fact that the family doctor was sort of like the gatekeeper and oversaw all of the medical care. Mm-hmm. So that's what made me want to do family medicine. I entertain general surgery, but I have a familial tremor, so I chose family medicine. But when I went to residency at McLeod, did my internship there, 2 years of residency, came back to the community, joined a group in Walterboro. And when I came back, Dr. Baggett said, okay, the clinic is yours. So I was trying to get the clinic to be more public, to be a service of our community to the public, to the community at large. Well, our former chief in leadership didn't want to do that. But then we got a new chief in office, and he understood my desire to open it up to the public. And, it would give more voice and more exposure to our tribal community with us offering free medical care, et cetera. So anyway, we did that, and then funding became an issue. So we hired a grant writer and started writing grants. And so, and then I turned it into a nonprofit because that made us more open to other grants, that can be reoccurring. And so through the years, that's what's been happening. And then I decided after a year and a half, they offered me a partnership in the group that I had joined, and I prayed about it. And the Lord showed me I would be in a hard position to get out of. I'd be in a challenging, difficult position. And there was something else he had told me. Anyway, so I told the head doctor that I was working for there, I said, I'm not going to become a partner, and you could let me go today, or I'll finish up this 3 months and, just let me know what you want to do. Because the Lord had already showed me to open my practice, and I had already started putting things together. Anyway, he said, well, let me meet with the partners. And he told me, he said, and their goal for me to become a partner was to give up ministry, pastoring. And that wasn't an option for me,
Absolutely.
And when I came back, I was a FPOB, so I could have done OB, but they didn't do OB. So I gave up those skills. And then I did endoscopy, so like upper and lower endoscopy. Mm-hmm. And I did colposcopy, women's health for cancer. So what I did during the course of those 2 weeks, and then after that, I spent a week, set up my practice for a week and a half, and went on vacation for a half week, came back and started seeing patients. Mm-hmm. And then it was just explosive because all the patients were coming to where I was, across from the hospital in a rental place. So I expanded that place a little bit because it was in a warehouse, and I was able to expand the office some. And I said, I need some property, so prayed about building a practice, and rode around where some other medical practices were. And I said, man, that would be a great place there to build an office. Anyway, Dr. Miller, who was a cardiologist, was working upstairs, and I'm downstairs in a rental place. He says, John, I hear you're looking for a place to build a practice. And I said, yeah, sure. I sure am. And I said, I just made an offer on a piece down at the end. He said, well, I got some land I'll sell you, an acre. And I said, really? I said, where is it? He told me where it was. It was exactly where I just said that would be a great place to build a practice. And anyway, so it worked out. And the day before we were going to close, of course, he was backing out. He was wanting me to pay him more money. And I said, well, it must not be the Lord's will, so don't worry about it. Anyway, he called me back about 30 minutes, an hour later, and said, let's go ahead and close tomorrow. So needless to say, we started building. And then the next year so for 2 years, I was in a rental space. And then after that, for 18 years, I've been in my practice. So now I own the real estate and the practice that I'm in.
And that's Walterboro
Adult and Pediatric Medicine.
Awesome.
Yes.
And you chose that name as opposed to family medicine because?
Yeah, I just wanted the community to know that we took care of adult patients as well as pediatric. Mm-hmm. Also, it gave me the opportunity, because I built a pretty big practice, give me the opportunity to hire internists, which take care of adults, or pediatricians that would just take care of pediatric patients. And being a family physician, I can oversee those both sides. And if I use mid-level providers, when I first started practicing, we were allowed in South Carolina to oversee 4 mid-level providers. Now it's 6 mid-level providers. So
what I love about your story, Chief Creel, Dr. Creel, Pastor Creel, is that you shared it, but there was a point in your life where someone tried to make you sacrifice one path for another. Mm-hmm. And you saw your work with your tribe, your work in doctoral school, and now working in medicine, as well as your pastoral work, all a part of God's calling for your life. And what I see as the thread is you were called to be a shepherd, to shepherd all of these communities. And that was all part of your calling by God. And so there was not a separation between the sacred and secular for you as a believer. All of it was called by God.
So all one. I believe in the triune Godhead.
Absolutely.
And, and the triunity of man as well, So spirit, flesh, soul.
That's right.
So I'm a true modern day medicine man in the sense, but not in the old sense, So
that's right.
I don't think there's a way to separate it. I think for such a time as this,
Absolutely.
Just like the story of Esther, I feel like the Lord has moved me into a place and a position that we're praying that federal acknowledgement will become a reality, and that we would improve the medical care even more, even greater here in the community, that we would have an assisted living facility, not only in this community, but also in the Creeltown Indian community. And we're hoping to build a powwow arena, and a museum, a gift shop, and a wood shop to rebirth some of our ancestors, crafts. We're known for the cypress boat paddles, the cypress canoes, the white oak baskets. So I'd like to revive those crafts with our young people. Nowadays the young people are more on their phones or computers,
Mm-hmm.
but we're building a relationship with the Audubon Society, and we're going to have hundreds of acres that we can camp, fish, hunt, just farm. So some of those, bring back some of those old things. I also farm. I have a farm across from the church.
Awesome.
So I have about 17 acres. It's small, but last year I grew corn, sweet corn and deer corn. This year I have deer corn, sweet corn, watermelons, and cucumbers.
Beautiful. Dr. Creel, I want to talk about the federal recognition. Of course, you all became a state tribe in 2008. And so now you're fighting for federal recognition.
Yes.
You were showing me the paperwork in the back that you're currently doing. You're trying to digitize the archives. So is that the major hurdle? What are the major hurdles, I guess, to your federal recognition?
In 1987, we were state recognized. Years even before that, I think 2001, 2002, we were a part of a different state tribal groups that were recognized in the with concurrent resolutions by the South Carolina Senate and House of Representatives. But in 87 officially again, and then of course the Commission of Minority Affairs was brought into existence and came up with the stipulation of the laws with the process. And we started in 2008 the process, but it was actually in 2010 that we became re-recognized by the state through the Commission of Minority Affairs.
Amazing.
It's been a arduous task, I guess would be the word or something. But I just met last week with Michelle Keel, who's with the Kina group. She's an anthropology group, and Daryl Jordan, who's Native American, and they work with the Virginia tribes. There were 6 or 7 Virginia tribes that just got recognized through the legislative process. The Pamunkey tribe, they work with that tribe, and they're the last tribe to go through the DOI process, which they were recognized in 2016. So they came and did an in-service. Daryl was via Zoom, but she came actually and met with us. And I have a tribal historical committee that's putting together the petition now. And we basically, we were told that we can put everything together. We have to do a little summary. It's going to be about 700 to 1,000 pages. That's going to be the summary of our tribe. But then you have to have all the cited documents in-house, which we have those in-house. Now we're being told we have to get those digitized. So if they need access to it, rather than come to our community, we'd be able to send it to them in a digitized format. So it's tough how they make it harder and harder for us to prove who we are. And it's amazing to me that Native American Indians are the only people that have to really prove who they are. And then we live in this area where there's paper genocide because of the Sherman fires and moving of documents to Columbia and to Charleston, during the colonial era or during some of the wars early on. So it's a big challenge because there's paper genocide. But the thing is, we've always been here. And we have documents. We have the Kusso plantation. We have the Coachman property. We have our cemeteries. We've been in Creeltown Indian community since 1840. We've been in this Four Holes Indian community since 1905 when we inoculated this area. But the federal acknowledgement, it's a long and arduous process. But and then Nancy Mace introduced some legislation in the 118th Congress, I think, or 117th Congress. And it got stalled in the Indigenous Peoples Committee. So our tribe, the Edisto Natchez-Kusso tribe, the Wassamasaw tribe, and the Waccamaw tribe, the three of us have petitions or legislation, should I say, in the House of Representatives for federal acknowledgement. But of course, you have to get something in the Senate as well. I've been promised by Senator Graham and Scott that once we introduced our document into the DOI, that they would do a similar type bill in the Senate so that we can get a concurrent resolution for federal acknowledgement through the legislative process. But, recently, last year, I think 144 federal tribes released a documentary declaring that they don't want state tribes to be legislatively recognized. They want them to go through the process of the DOI. You know what I'm saying? Because the thought with the federal tribes, I'm assuming, is that the pie would get smaller, but they don't realize the pie gets bigger, So that's one of the challenges too. We're so thankful that we're beginning to work more closely with the Catawba Nation, which is the only federal tribe in South Carolina. Chief Brian Harris has been very instrumental in coming to our meetings, and his second chief, and he was just elected as the chairman of the board. I supported him 100%. And I like what he's doing. Our goal would be to come together with some type of working together, the communities, because I would like to see medical facilities like this in all the Native communities. And I would like to see assisted living facilities in all the Native communities. It tears your heart out when we have elders that grow up in our church and in our community, and then they have to be placed in a nursing facility. And if there's no place locally, they have to go like 3-4 communities away. And it's hard to visit with the economic times that we're living in, for families. So our goal would be to have those people stay in the local community. Another thing that we're trying to work with the federal tribe with is NAGPRA. We've recently visited in Charlestown Landing. Several years ago, they found a lady, a female with a daughter, remains, and they traced it to Mississippi. So we know it's Native American. They're Native American, and we know that's part of our tribe. That's Natchez women, and now they're in boxes on shelves. And so we're trying to come up with a plan and a way to repatriate them. And Charlestown Landing, the archaeologist, wants to put those remains back at that site. But we're working with a plan with the Catawba Nation and the other state tribes to see if we can come up with a plan. There's been discussion of moving those remains or repatriating those remains in a specific site, like on an island. I think we talked about Goat Island, or maybe in the Rock Hill on the Catawba Reservation. But, most of the state tribes, we would rather have our people that are associated with our tribe in our tribal areas. Yes. So we could do ceremonies periodically and then do a special ceremony when we do the repatriation. So
yes. That's one thing we talked about in our episode with Chief Nelson last year was about, his passion for seeing a museum of sorts come about in our state. Yeah. We have the International African American Museum in Charleston, and doing something similar for Native Americans. And, you talked about paper genocide. It's almost difficult for this generation to conceive of being able to wipe out an entire group of people, or evidence of that group of people, right. Just by getting rid of the records. But that is categorically and historically done. Right. So what do you think that would look like, that museum? What would you like for that endeavor?
Well, I just did an article for the College of Charleston, and I talked about systemic racism.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But, that was my coined phrase. I said, remember I said that,
Yes.
But do things. And I think a museum for the state would be ideal. We have 9 state tribes. We have several groups of Native Americans here that just have not been able yet to put together their documentation through the CMA for state recognition. I feel like the state tribe should work together with those groups to help them get that designation. And then, of course, the federal tribe should be working with us in regards to moving forward to federal acknowledgement if we are able to approve those 7 criteria that's set forth. So a museum would be tremendous. We're going to do a tribal museum for our community. That's another thing I would like to see in every community. Kit Kelly is a graduate student. She's graduating next month. So she has done a story map that will be shared at the powwow tonight and tomorrow.
I can't wait.
It'll be shared like in an individual group basis. And I just finished reviewing her version number 3. So we're working on it. And I see that there's going to be another version because I caught a couple of things that needs to be fixed. But anyway, we've been working together with her on that. I've shared that with the Council of Chiefs. Everybody's interested. Also, we've been meeting with conservationist groups to help us as Native Americans to be able to become stewards, to sort of collaborate and come together, partnership to take care of some of the lands or steward some of the lands that's in the area that's state-owned property and so forth. So, but anyway, these story maps really show where we were, how we migrated to where we are today, and the timeline. So it's a very good history, and so that would be used probably. My guess is we'll use those in the museums in the communities, and then you could use that also in a state museum. So you can have like all the different tribes, sort of like in Charlestown Landing. We're working with Charlestown Landing too to update their museum there. And my dad's picture actually is in their museum, the one I think it's the same one. But anyway, we went through and, talked with him a little bit about some things that needed to be corrected or better stated, So anyway, so I think that would be ideal is a state museum, and in each tribal community have a small museum. And then each of those state museums would have their own story map, and then have those story maps individualized in a state museum. But also if we could put together one with the Catawba, with the state tribes, with everybody, sort of intermingle and show the rich history, Native American history of our state. That would be great.
Well, this is the launch of a public campaign, isn't it, Dr. Creel? You just laid out a whole plan for a museum and what that would look like. And these story maps are digital, right? Digitized. Yes. Okay. Yes. Beautiful. Amazing. Yep. And what a lot of people don't know about CMA is that actually is a part of our legislative charter to help Native American groups be state recognized. People don't know that's part of CMA's work. Yes. If you want it, you come to CMA for it.
Right.
And you've worked with CMA for a long time. Mm-hmm. You've talked about CMA's impact, but when you think about the Commission for Minority Affairs, like how did you come in contact with us? You've served on the advisory board, et cetera. So,
Dr. DaCosta has done wonderful in coming to the communities, sending representatives, to talk with us to see what our needs were. Mm-hmm. And a great collaboration and working together and bettering our communities. And I think even the Council of Chiefs has been more cooperative and collaborative as a result of, the process of the CMA, because it gives us a common ground, like a unity and a focus, a goal to work together on. For example, Chief Lamar is trying to become state recognized, and we're all trying to help him and saying, we're here, whatever you need and whatever we can do to help you in the process. We want you to become state recognized, just like the CMA wants groups to become state recognized. So I think it's more of a community, collegial effort that we're pushing for now. So
I love that. And I do love that there's not a competitive edge to that, but there is a sense of family, sense of belonging, and wanting others to have their culture preserved as well for the next generation. That's very important. Now, speaking of that, you fill a lot of leadership hats in this community. At the center, pastor of Little Rock Holiness, you are the leader of 2 practices, the Free Clinic, but also you're working in Walterboro. And then alongside that, you're chief of your tribe now. For every Moses, there's a Joshua. So when you think about mentorship and who you're rearing to be next, what are you looking for? And do you already have your eyes set on people that are capable of doing that?
I am the chief delegator.
Okay.
So, and I've always heard and believed that, in leadership, you really have to surround yourself with people with good qualities and that good work ethic. And I feel like our tribal council is excellent. We assign we have a rubric of different committees, and everybody does their different responsibilities. This powwow, all of us are on the powwow committee, but each of us do different things. Leon, for example, oversees the senior reform for housing reform, for fixing wheelchair ramps or fixing porches, bathrooms, etc. So he does that. We all help to get the money, and then he gets a group of volunteers and they do the work, and picking up trash through the community. So he does that too. So everybody, and then collaborative efforts with other people like INET, the Air Force works with us. Boeing has a group that works with us. They'll probably be at the powwow tonight and tomorrow. And then we have College of Charleston, so I think building those networks, Dorchester Heritage Center, those networks, so the Walterboro Museum, Miss Slocum, they were on, Miss Slocum and Phyllis with the Dorchester Heritage Center. They're on the Tribal Historical Committee. Dr. Keegan from the College of Charleston and Kit Kelly, our graduate student. She has 2 more graduate students now that's coming in that will be working with us on the petition, et cetera. So the tribal, and then having a good council and keeping everybody up to speed on everything that's going on. Andy always told me there's a lot of meetings, and I'm telling you, I have like 3, 4, 5 meetings a week, basically. Mostly now Zoom, thank goodness, because, the practice is busy and I need to be there. But I'm able to cut back some because the practice is older and I have people working there. So the practice is becoming a little more self-sufficient. I have 5 providers. I have 4 that are nurse practitioners, that do family medicine. 3 do family medicine. 1 does adolescent and geriatrics. And then I just hired another one. And then I have a mental health nurse practitioner that does telehealth here on Fridays for us. Of course, today we're closed because of the powwow. But so again, surrounding yourself with good people. Jean was my clinic administrator here. Recently, my office manager decided to take a job with DHEC. And so I moved Jean to the office in Walterboro, and Jessica, who's a tribal member, is now the administrator here. Jean, it was from outside the community, but he's been very instrumental and good in working and, creating a bridge and collaboration between the free clinic and the office, which is, again, to me, they're all one, they're separate, but one. And, So having good staff at the office there, the church, I have several ministers at the church. Some are beginning to branch out to other ministries, but that's sort of what a pastor wants, I'm the director of the South Dakota Youth Camp Ministries. That was given to me from a Church of God pastor about 15 years ago. So we work with the Teton Band of the Lakota Sioux, which has the highest suicide rate, shortest lifespan of any people group in the world, is what I'm told. And we had been having camp in July, but we'd have to break the ice. And then it seems like after the first night or second night, you would have like great altar services, and we have a lot of fun things we do during the day, but then at night we'd have church, service. The Lord blessed us. We raised funds for that, donations. And the Lord kept blessing with more and more money. And I said, well, Lord, what do you want us to do? And then my thought was, we need to go back to those communities and break those strongholds and open the door, rebuild the wall and open the door for the kingdom there.
Yes.
So we started last year doing camp meeting, and man, I'm telling you, the police came. They were wondering what was going on. They said they came for a DSS check, but they were just coming to see what was going on. And I had one of our mission students there. He said, Pastor, I'm sorry I wasn't in church, but he said, the Spirit of the Lord laid on my heart to park cars, the valet park. He said, I've been parking cars all night. So it's people coming and leaving and getting saved. Delivered, alcoholism, all kinds of things. It was powerful. And then we started having the Kids Crusade at Standing Rock Reservation at the McLaughlin Church of God. Mm-hmm. And we did the camp meeting last September on the Cheyenne River Reservation at Eagle Butte. And some of the folks from the LaPlante Indian community would come to those services. The pastors both, actually Sister Addie, she's an African-American pastor. She was a school teacher there for the Native children on the reservation. And she's been there for over 50 years, and they actually adopted her in the tribe. And because you're not allowed, if you're not a part of the tribe, to go to the medicine wheel, which is their nursing home facility. Mm-hmm. So anyway, they adopted her in the tribe, and now she's at the medicine wheel. And she was able to come to some of those services too. But now Pastor Dillard, who is pastoring LaPlante and Eagle Butte, and we're working with some of the leaders there in their churches to hopefully get them up to place where they can be the leaders in those churches. So we did the Kids Crusade. This year, next month, my wife and I are going to fly to McLaughlin. We're going to fly to South Dakota. We'll be at McLaughlin Church there, preaching a revival with Brother Rob Murrell from Ohio with the Abundant Life Tabernacle Ministries. And they have missionaries. So the missionary students come from their church. They have about 8 to 10 that go through the program, and they usually spend time with us in South Dakota, and then they go to Nicaragua for a month or 2 months, and then they do some other outreach in communities in the area, and then they get a certificate for completion of the missionary training program. Yes. So we're going to do the crusade in June. I may not go back to that, because what I do is I'm the director of the youth camp that's in July, and I'm the director over that ministry. So Brother Murrell coordinates the camp meetings and the revivals. The Kids Crusades is coordinated by Ashley Falk, who's a pastor of the Assembly of God in Alabama. So he coordinates the youth camp, Kids Crusade. So if I'm not available, the ministry still goes on, and usually they have freedom, I have full confidence in them. So you're the coordinator, thank you for passing it by me, but do what you think is right. And then September, we'll do the camp meeting again at Eagle Butte. Eagle Butte is the bigger community, Native American community there. So they have about 3,600 population. Most of those other small communities have about maybe 300, 200, McLaughlin might be pretty big too. I'm not sure, about 1,600, 1,100, 1,600 population. But yeah.
Wow. I'm glad to hear that these works are becoming sustaining themselves, and that all that has been built won't be lost. And I think part of that is because you are giving at the heart of the community, you are giving them the word of God, the gospel of Christ. And I think that everything else is the product of that. So that will last. Yes. But if we give them ourselves, well, we obviously are temporal. So I think that that's beautiful. Medical work, pastoral work, your work here as a chief. To close out, just tell us what you want your legacy to be. What do you want to be remembered for in this community? Yeah.
Federal acknowledgement.
Federal acknowledgement.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and I think bettering the communities.
Yes,
I would like for the healthcare to get better each year. Assisted living facility and nursing home facility, hospice care, rehab. For that to get better. There's another big issue in the communities, which is in every community, is drugs and alcoholism. We have experienced redemptive lift. That's not as big a problem now. When I was a young child growing up here, alcoholism was really bad. Different ones would bootleg, make their own alcohol, etc., and fights every weekend, get cut or shot. But since the gospel's come through, we've experienced redemptive lift. So I would like to see that continuing. Yes. And again, I think that, like you were saying too, that the key is that vision. You know what I mean? Keeping that vision alive and having that burden where there's no vision, the people perish. So I think too, creating the opportunities. And I mean, we have other people. Steve Bodmer, he's a attorney for Indian law. And he lives in Nevada, I think, and he works for Pajunga Band of a tribe in California. And, he's been successful. He's moved away. Maybe there'll come a day that he'll want to move back to the community. So I think, and help us with practicing law for our tribe and tribal affairs, et cetera. So our goal would be to educate and get people to come back to the community. So healthcare is important. Education is important. Housing is important. All of the mobile homes, throughout our communities, there's a lot of mobile homes. I would love to see them replaced with houses built for our tribal people. One of the big issues now is we're ground zero for development here in the Four Holes Indian community. And a lot of the elders, they may have paid just a few $100s for their land, and now they can sell it for thousands. It's like $30,000 an acre now, and with a house on it worth a lot of money. And so, and then the other thing is taxes. When the property value goes up, taxes go up. So that's why we want to become federal, so we can come up with a way that land would be a part of the quote reservation, so that we won't lose land. Because we have had some of the plots of land that were heirs property, ended up being heirs property. And then there's an issue with that. So some of the alliances that we're making with the conservationist groups is coming up with a plan or a way that we can talk with our tribal communities, when they have, family-owned property, that we can help secure that property for the tribe and for that family, and then if that family comes to an end or whatever, then we would move it on to another family, so just to have it self-sustaining, and we keep the land.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, I don't believe anything that you've stated as a desire is a fantasy. I think that is a dream, that you've written the vision, you've made it plain. So I know that you're going to run with that. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else you do. This is a beautiful community, Walterboro, Ridgeville, where we're at right now, and Cottageville as well. So we commend you on the work you've done, Chief Creel.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today, Chief Creel. How can people stay connected to what you're doing? How can people stay connected to what you're doing? on social media, I guess?
Yes, we have. You can Google the Edisto Natchez-Kusso Tribe of South Carolina. Our email or our website is funny, but if you Google Edisto Natchez-Kusso Tribe of South Carolina, you can Google my name, John Glenn Creel, and you'll find different articles, different things. Sabrina Creel, she's our tribal secretary. If you Google her name, you'll come up with things about the tribe. So again, Facebook, we're on Facebook, website. The Edisto Indian Free Clinic is another way. If you look on Facebook, you can get information in regards to our tribe.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Chief Creel.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Till next time, everybody. Did you enjoy the episode? I hope you did. Be sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and connect with us on all digital platforms so you don't miss the next episode of the Culture Connect. We'll see you next time, everybody.